Hey guys, welcome to I Hope to Hear This podcast. We have returning guest Edward Sun. And today we're not talking so much captivated. We already covered that. But today we have a very specific reason, specific to this podcast, why we have Edward. So, Edward, thank you for being on. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. And it's weird because you haven't been on the podcast since what, like last year?
Yeah, I think it was end of last year. It was like December.
Yeah.
Last December.
Yeah. But I feel like you've been on the podcast a lot only because we communicate via this platform quite often.
Yes.
We've been talking in communication with each other pretty regularly this past year. And that's because we were working behind the scenes on a kind of a rebrand of the podcast.
Yes, that's right.
I during the 2019 recap episode I did last year, I kind of teased at the fact that we would be working on a rebranding. I didn't divulge who it would be with at the time, but now you guys know it was with Edward. So it's been in the works for that long. And it was because the process was very involved. I mean, a lot of it had to do with the fact that, there was a pandemic going on and we each had personal things that we had to attend to. But it was a very involved, very from like the ground up kind of process, right? And so we have Edward on today to kind of launch this rebrand and also for Edward to kind of talk us through what it takes to really do what he did. Because I thought it was incredible, and I'm really happy with the product, and so I wanted to talk through that with you today, Edward.
Sweet, I'm excited.
Yeah, so let's just start from the beginning. Like the first meeting that we had. Do you remember what it was like?
Yes, I remember we met at a cafe back when you can meet in public places.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess I asked you a bunch of questions. Stuff like, what are your goals for this, and why do you want to rebrand, and what do you hope? What do you hope for out of this process? And then I kind of showed you, I asked those general information, and then I asked you like, I showed you some logos that already exist in the world, so I could get a feel for your taste visually. Because a lot of people say, I like something modern. And modern could mean a million different things aesthetically, just getting on the same page about that stuff. And then I think it was pretty short, that meeting. And then the real, like, me asking you everything was in the meeting after that, I think.
Yeah, but I think the first meeting was really helpful because I've never gone through a process of working with a designer on something. The previous logo for this podcast was a generic photo from the Anchor app. So like there could be potentially, I think, tons of other podcasts out there that share the same image. But I really just picked it thinking, oh, it's bright and orange. Maybe it'll catch people's attention. But there was no thought beyond that, right? It was just, hey, it's a bullhorn. I'm telling people what I hope they hear, so maybe it'll be good. But talking with you as to kind of the purpose of the podcast, what I hoped it would be, and things like that, it actually really helped me because there were things that I wasn't really thinking about much. I think I wanted the podcast to just kind of be whatever I wanted it to be in the moment, but that kind of kept it unfocused, and it had me kind of every week thinking about, well, what should I do this week? Because there was, it was too broad. But that first week was great. It was really challenging, right? It was, hey, like, what are you trying to do with the podcast? Was, I think, one of the main questions you asked, and I had to really think about it. Yeah, and
that's right. Yeah, I remember. I think one huge part of that first meeting was also me. I really tried to educate a lot about logos, like what makes a good logo and what makes a good brand, because a lot of it is just differentiation, which people don't, I guess, realize. And also logos that are witty are kind of more popular, but they're not necessarily more effective, So stuff like that we talked about. And then, yeah, a big challenge that we got into when we started doing more of, I guess this is called the discovery process of the branding project, is we really got into like who's going to be your focus,
Yeah.
you know, like what is your target audience going to be? And we kind of had to battle the fear of losing potential artists and guests and audiences versus really honing in and being really relevant to a specific demographic, you know? I think that was the biggest challenge. And that's like a huge challenge for a lot of people as well who go through this process. But
Yeah, and I think what really helped me kind of buy into that was, all the stats you brought. I think it was in the first meeting where you were, you did a lot of research specifically to podcasts, and you said, hey, people are more likely to listen while they're doing this instead of doing this. These type of people, the podcasts that do well are, they're focused in this way, and all those kind of things. And I think that discussion really happened at a good time, because I think that was when I was also really trying to hone in on what the actual identity of the podcast was going to be. Because like I mentioned several times, is the I Hope They Hear This podcast really started, and it was formatted in a way where I could really let it be whatever I wanted it to be. Like I didn't started with the intention of I want it to be this. So to be able to go into it after a year, pretty much after a year of having done the podcast, I had more experience. I had more of an idea of what I wanted it to be. And so that discussion, I think, was so integral to this rebrand, right? If you hadn't had the discussion with me, if you didn't ask those questions and we just jumped into, well, what kind of logos do you like? And let's try to design what the logo is going to look like, I think we would have gotten a much sloppier product at the end.
No, for sure. I think what's super important is the discovery process, like learning what we want the company to be, what we want the brand to be, so that it's not just up to subjective opinions later, right? So if I say it needs to look like this, or here's the iconography, like stuff that I incorporated in the versions I'm showing you, I can say, because we agreed that the purpose was this, or the goal was this, and our values are this, because of that, I incorporated those things and represented them visually this way. But without that, it's kind of just up to, oh, I like this, I don't like this, I'm not feeling this, whatever, And then that's when you get into like a million revisions, and then nobody's happy. And so it's really to protect everyone and not to waste anyone's time, but also it's valuable because it gives you, I guess, more clarity, more direction. So that's the strategy. I think the strategy side versus just the design side, I think they should both come together always with branding, not just make me a logo.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So. Yeah. And I remember we kind of, I think the entire process was super smooth, right? But I think like you were saying, the biggest challenge was kind of defining the target audience. I think at one point we were going back and forth, like, should it be to Christians? Should it be not to Christians? Should it be like, I think we even talked about like race at one point. But I think where we landed was, okay, the target audience we want to see is like Christian, young adult, Asian Americans, right?
That's right. In Metro Atlanta.
In Atlanta, right.
So very specific, as opposed to before where none of those parameters were there. But, a big thing that was really helpful, I think, and the most helpful thing in the whole process, I think there's two things. One was when I met with you and I asked you all those questions and we really clarified, what you want it to be. And then the second most helpful, maybe even more helpful, was the interviews that I did with listeners of the podcast. So I called 3 people who listened to the podcast, and we had a conversation. I asked them a bunch of questions about how they felt about it and what made it special, stuff like that. How could it be improved? What are the weaknesses? All that. And then we kind of came out with it seeing like everybody agreed that it was a really good representation of the life of Christians in Atlanta, Asian American Christians. And because of that, like we also saw that, the podcast maybe unintentionally, just because you're interviewing people, not intentionally saying, oh, I want Asians and I want Christians, right? But it just unintentionally became that, like, we wanted it to be accurate. We kind of just wanted to own it. You know what I'm saying? And then that kind of feels authentic, but also gives it focus and clarity. And so I think those conversations were huge.
Yeah.
Like, bringing that makes it, most of the time with this process, it makes the client feel like, oh, this is actually exactly me, or this is exactly us, because we got it from the people, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the owners can sometimes have a really biased perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's why I think the whole process was, it's not just, this was not just a design project. I feel like this was truly like identifying the identity of what the podcast is and what I was trying to make it become. So yeah, I forgot about that, but yeah, that was huge. The fact that you were able to come back to me and say, hey, this is kind of the feedback from the listeners that I interviewed. And like kind of, because I never get to do that, right? Like me personally, I talk to my friends who listen, but this was, way more objective, right? Because like they could tell you honestly what they thought about it without like, because like, you're just you're not the owner of the podcast, so you wouldn't be offended by anything negative, right? So I think, the whole process of really, I think you broke it out like this, right? It was, what do I want it to be? Like, what do like people like view it as? No, like, what do I think it is? What do people view it as? And what do I like want it to become, right? Like, like defining those things so that it's not just a blob of random thoughts out there, but like actually like honing in on that, I think it was super helpful for me.
Well, great. That's so great to hear. The other thing that maybe people won't know is that, I did a ton of research about the whole branding process, but I never tried it on anyone from beginning to end until this podcast. So this was also like a huge learning experience for me. And to see that it worked was amazing to me, like the fact that when I brought something to you and you were like, this is exactly what I felt like this should be, or I really feel like this is right for us. It kind of showed that the process is actually like fail safe. You know what I'm saying? It's foolproof. It's it's just based on what people said. You know what I'm saying? Like the whole discovery process was the foundation for everything. And I think that really is the reason why it was so smooth, even into the later 3 phases after that,
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to clarify on the target audience part. I don't want people to think, oh, well, I'm not a Christian young adult Asian American living in Metro Atlanta, so I should stop listening to the podcast. That's like, you made it very clear that the target audience wasn't meant to be like, well, this is exactly who must now listen to the podcast. This is an exclusive club of just these people. No, I think the idea of identifying the target audience is to just say, well, who's actually listening? Who is it going to resonate with most? Because I remember that's why it was a challenge, right? Because I wanted to be like, well, I don't want it to just be these people listening. I want it to be a broader range of people. But you were like, no. Right. It's not just about who we're gonna give special permission to listen to the podcast about. It's just the identity, like the way that it's been built so far, and the way that I kind of wanted to take it. The branding needs to project like immediately just from like looking at the branding, like who would it be helpful to, right? So that's, you were saying, correct me if I'm wrong. I might be misremembering things, but you were saying that you wanted the branding to communicate who the target audience is, right? So that people can kind of get it like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea was not, if you are not in this audience, then you will hate this podcast, or you need to not listen to this podcast. There's going to always be people like that. There's always going to be people you don't expect who actually like it, right? But we wanted it to be where if somebody falls within this demographic, everyone who falls within that demographic is going to like it. That was the idea, right?
Yep.
So if I am an Asian American Christian in Atlanta and I see this podcast, I will immediately like it and I will listen to it. You know what I'm saying? Because it was technically created for me and the communication is tailored towards me. And that is not only the target audience, but that's also what differentiates the podcast from all the other podcasts. There's no other podcast that is doing that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the main idea. There's always going to be people who, I mean, we even talked about, we want some people who aren't Asian and want to know, or people who aren't in Atlanta who want to know, or people who aren't Christian who want to know more, who are going to be interested. And that's important to us. Like, we value that. But more important than that is we want to make sure our community has a voice, right? And we want the people who listen to the podcast who are part of that community to feel like they are represented or they're understood. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think that's the main focus of honing in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that's kind of the hardest part as someone who is the owner of the brand, right? Because the idea is you go into it, because this is what I read a lot when I first started the podcast. Almost every article I read said you want to have a focused target audience. You want to have a focused like identity, like a niche like group that you're addressing. But
yeah,
I never liked that, because like I'm a huge fan of the Joe Rogan podcast, and you can't really put him in a box, right? He just talks on everything. It's very broad topics, you know. So I think I always thought I kind of want to be that more than anything. But walking through this branding process helped me see the value in actually, you know, thinking about differentiating myself, the podcast, and also getting into who the target should be. So the thing I wanted to talk about next is the actual logo, because I think there's so much behind it. There is like every little part of it is like very intentional. And I want to make sure everyone listening understands what the new logo is. So do you kind of want to walk us through kind of the logo?
Sure, let's do it. So I guess most people will probably see the logo on the podcast art. Basically how we landed on this logo, one thing, I chose a color palette. The first thing is the color palette, which came from the idea that this is for Asian Americans, right? So I took the most common colors from the Southeast Asian flags, right? So you have red, blue, which are in the Taiwan flag, in the South Korean flag. I mean, there's more. And then the color yellow. And then those were the three originally, actually, just those, and then white, which also include the American flag colors, red, white, and blue. So it kind of felt perfect for Asian America. It represented that well. But, you know, in the revision process, we felt, I don't know if we want to completely remove orange, because we don't want to make it feel like, this is completely not connected to the previous branding at all, because most people probably already associate the podcast with the color orange. So I included orange in there, and that actually ended up looking even better because it kind of provided more of a gradient effect. And that, you know, really appealed to me visually. So that's the first thing, the color. The second thing is the icon. So you'll see, like in the upper left, there's this icon that consists of two shapes, right? And so there's this speech bubble, because the whole idea, the big idea of the whole podcast that we came to in the strategy phase was we want to give the community a voice, right? And the way that we're going to depict that visually is the icons and the symbols and the visual elements that are associated with speech, right? So like a speech bubble, or the bubble that goes, that your text messages are in, you know what I'm saying? So I kind of took that idea, but also the giving them a voice or elevating them, empowering them, kind of putting them out to so more people can hear it. With the megaphone idea, like again, going back to, we don't want this to feel completely disconnected from the old branding, right? And so I don't know, I through my explorations of the shapes and the logos and everything, I came to this way for, there's actually something in common with the left part of a megaphone and a speech bubble, and so I just combined that, and I felt like it was perfect. Like, you could easily tell it's a megaphone, you could easily tell there's a speech bubble. Both of those things align perfectly with what we felt the podcast was actually all about. And then not only that, it was super simple, which is super important for a logo. You want people to, if you ask somebody, hey, draw this company's logo, you want them to be able to draw it from scratch, right? From memory. You don't want it to be too complicated. So this is extremely fitting for that.
Yeah.
Not only that, I think it's memorable once you understand the meaning behind it. And there is nothing like it. I don't think, in my research, there's nothing as close to what we have for I Hope They Hear This. And so I was super proud of this logo. Actually, when I created it, I was like, this is a genius idea. It just came together so perfectly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I'm very proud of this logo, and I really like it. So.
And it appeals to me personally as well, because one of the first, like we talked about during our first session, you had me kind of look through specific logos, and I chose which logos I liked. And we realized that I kind of like the sharp logos. And if you look at the logo, there's a lot of like sharp features to it. So like on a personal level, I think it looks awesome. And yeah, like you were saying, when you understand the meaning behind like the colors, what the two parts of the icon like actually represent and what it looks like as a whole, I think it's really memorable. It really does. At a quick glance, it does communicate what we're trying to do with the podcast. And it was interesting. I'm kind of I don't know if I'm a pretty passive guy. And obviously during this whole process, you're the expert. So there was never a point where I said, hey, no, I absolutely hate this. Like, we got to change it. Everything was always a suggestion just based on my limited knowledge of what branding and design is. But like, you were so great to work with, because I'll just throw an idea out there, like, hey, like, and the whole orange thing, right? Including orange in the color it actually came from my wife. My wife saw one of the first drafts of the logo, and she said, well, like, your brand, I feel like it has a lot to do with orange. I worry that people like if you completely dissociate yourself from it, maybe people will think that it's going to be a completely different podcast moving forward.
Right.
So if we threw the color orange, I just threw it out there, not saying, hey, Edward, let's go ahead and add orange. It was just a suggestion. Hey, well, how would it look like with orange? And, like you were, I really appreciated you not just writing it off, but, like, I guess it was because of trust, right? I trusted you to write it off if it was a completely bad idea. But like I think there was another one where for the episode templates,
oh yes,
the first set you sent were all black backgrounds, and I said, hey, like, how would it look with like a white background? But that interaction I really appreciated, because you didn't just say, okay, I'll just change the color to white and then send it back to him. You actually looked at it and said, hey, well, white, it was the contrast was too bright, right?
Yeah, it just felt like it was too much. especially now, it's a huge trend to not use really bright colors, especially when people are viewing on screens all the time more now, especially for podcasts, always on the phone. And dark mode is all the rage, you know what I'm talking about? So I decided that an off-white would be better. And you wouldn't really notice that it wasn't white either. Your mind would think that it's white, but it wouldn't like blind you every time you saw pure 100% white. So
yeah, and that's the trust I had in you, right? To not do the thing just because I said it, but really look at it and see the merit of it. And I think that's what made this whole process super smooth. Like, I didn't fear that my input would ruin what you're doing, because like I trusted that you would throw away anything that didn't make sense. But also the fact that you valued my opinion it's weird, right? Because they seem like they would be contradictory, but I feel like you found a very good balance in between, to say I'll take consideration of your input, I'll value it, but I'm also going to inject my expertise, what I know of design, and to make sure that none of that kind of crosses boundaries that it needs to stay within.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That means a lot. That's a great compliment.
Yeah.
I do always try to incorporate revision, like what the client thinks, because you don't want branding is the most important and the most emotionally invested an owner is going to be, you know what I'm saying? In design. Like if it's just a product, you could just say, oh, I didn't like that one. Next one, we're going to change it. Right. But with branding, it's so close to the owner's heart that to just say, I'm just not going to take that suggestion. It could really leave a bad taste in their mouth, because it's so close. It's so important. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah. And just so people who are curious know, this wasn't just about the logo, like we were saying. You basically created like a design guide for me, right? It includes like all the colors that we would use, like all the different fonts that we would use. Like you chose specific fonts to go with the branding identity of the podcast. I specifically requested like episode templates. So you provided those. And you provided it so like in a format that I can easily, update, change, and things like that. So, well, let me ask you this: is this something that you're gonna try to continue to do in the future, helping brands do this?
Yeah, I would really love to. I mean, I also did this for the company I work for, Brain Trust Creative. I mean, it was a really collaborative process because everyone there is creative. But I've also been trying to do it for more friends. I've been trying to bring in more of these types of projects to that company so that I can work on it, with, at my full time. Because, I think a big reason why ours was drawn out was because I was doing it in my free time.
Yeah, no,
But yeah, so I would really love to keep doing this. And I think especially after seeing how this one turned out, I'm just it's like so rewarding, because like we went through so much work and so many meetings, but the end really feels like what we wanted, and I really like that. So
yeah, and I mean it is definitely a time investment. Like even if like the pandemic didn't happen, even if like you were working on it full time, like it's just the meetings that we had alone, it was a pretty big time investment, right? But I think it was necessary, like hugely necessary in coming to the product that we came to. And like I just think that I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted the podcast logo to look like. So if we went into it without having kind of cemented the identity, there definitely would have been so many revisions. Like I'm the type, I'm the type where I know what I like when I see it, but I can't really express it, especially for visual things. I can't like say, hey, this is exactly what I want it to look like. I'll just be able to tell you, I like this, I don't like this. So the fact that we kind of came to a consensus, like an agreement on what the podcast identity should be, really helped me kind of get in my mind, okay, then like I'm going to be expecting something that communicates this, our brand's value and identity. And when I saw our logo, it definitely did that, right? So yeah, anyone out there who has a brand or who is looking to launch a brand or whatever it may be, contact Edward. It's like I said, it's not going to be just a one session discussion with him and he'll get you a product. He's going to walk you through a lot of different things, but I think it actually provides value beyond the brand and the logo. Like I feel like I mentioned it to you multiple times throughout our sessions. It's just being able to understand more of what I should focus on in terms of the content of the podcast helps hugely.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for the plug. I appreciate that.
Of course. Everyone follow Edward Creates on Instagram and contact him via that if this is something that you're interested in. And I mean, monetarily speaking, it's also not a small investment, right? Because it takes up a lot of your time. Just so everyone knows, But again, like I said, it's super worth it. There's a lot of value in it. So if you're trying to actually really launch something legit, for sure, talk to Edward. And yeah, the design guide, I can't talk enough about this, but the design guide that you gave me, it's not just for you, right? It's not just for me. It's if I want to do something in the future with a different designer, then I can just hand off that design guide to that person, and they'll have, the color palettes, the fonts, like everything to work with, to make even future projects easier. So yeah, I'm hoping I'm articulating the value well. Because
and if you guys listeners need like a better understanding or picture of the whole process, I'll have a whole case study up on my website. And my website, if you follow my Instagram, you'll see the website there. So yeah, if you want to look more at the beautiful things that we created together, then go look at that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be up by the time this episode is out. So
yeah. Well, so that's kind of the podcast rebrand. I hope you guys can now look at the logo and really appreciate, all the meaning behind it. But Edward, since I have you on, I actually wanted to talk to you just about you're such an insightful, deep thinking guy. I always love talking to you. So I actually wanted to open up our conversations with a question of like, how has it been? Because you're married now, but you got married during the pandemic, and the entirety of your married life has been,
that's right,
with COVID, right? So how's that been, bro?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. So it wasn't just that we got married during COVID. It was that we got married during the stay-at-home orders. Okay, so like we had to go to a really far county in Georgia because they were the only ones that were accepting people like actually coming in and answering the phone to make appointments, all that. So we had to go there to get our license, and then we scrapped the whole ceremony, like the 100-person guest list we had. We just didn't invite them. And then we decided to just go with our bridal party, but they weren't there in person either. They were they joined through Zoom. Same with the officiant, they joined through Zoom. And so, yeah, it was just it was just both sets of parents. Deborah's sister was there, but my siblings weren't there. So it was literally like 10 people, present. And then we had like terrible Wi-Fi situation. So everyone who was present, it went really well, actually. It was at Deborah's, my wife's parents' backyard. They had a really nice backyard. They decorated it like so beautifully. The pictures actually turned out amazing. So it was actually great. It's just no one heard our vows. And no one could tell when we had already kissed or whatever. It was weird. But after that, since then it's been really good. I mean, I hear.
Let me ask you about, because I remember seeing like a picture of your wedding, and the officiant, Pastor Joe, right, he was on like an iPad, right?
That's right. He was on my laptop.
Oh, right. So like, how did that work? With the bad Wi-Fi connection, like, did he do the whole like service as he normally would, or?
Yeah, well, so luckily the Wi-Fi only broke, was like having problems when me and my wife were talking. So like after the message was already given, after the introduction and everything, so that was fine. But Joe, actually Pastor Joe's wife, Grace, she was the one running the Zoom session. So she was the one playing the music, making sure it was sharing properly, spotlighting the right things, and, switching between the different people. She was huge MVP with it. Both of them really worked really hard to make this happen. We did rehearsals, and they gave us like, Pastor Joe was also like, hey, send us the order of service that you want. And then he was like, send it by next week. And then we didn't. So he was like, here's an order of service I made for you guys and all of that. And then like the night before is when we sent them the songs. I mean, we were really rushed too, because we originally planned to get married 3 months after that point. But the whole thing was like, we don't need to plan a whole reception and ceremony anymore. So why should we wait to get married, you know? So yeah, it was pretty crazy, but he gave the message. I mean, like when the bride walked in, it was, the Wi-Fi was still working, thankfully. He introductions, everything. And then when he gave it to us to share our vows, that's when they couldn't see us anymore, and they could kind of hear us. So yeah, that was a whole experience.
Yeah.
But when we were sharing our vows, we were really into it. And then the parents who were there, they appreciated it a lot. And we enjoyed it a lot. We didn't even know they couldn't hear us until we finished our vows. And then they were like, did you finish your vows? And then, yeah. So yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, and it sounds memorable. I'm assuming a lot of people getting married during the pandemic has had to do similar things. But man, like let's say in like 5 years, when you tell the story of your marriage, like it's gonna be so like fun to hear about like how you guys had to go to different counties, like in the backyard, like had to bring in people virtually. Like I've heard of like guests being on Zoom, but your wedding is the first I've heard where the actual officiant was via
That's
Zoom.
True. Yeah. The thing is that Deborah's parents live in LaGrange, which is an hour and a half drive from here. So to ask people to go there who are not family, we felt like it was maybe a bit much to ask, plus like my parents are older than 65, and they're both I mean, in the very beginning, most people were really more cautious about the virus, but they were especially even more on the further end of cautious than most people. So I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable either. So but it worked. So
and that's beautiful. I mean, you didn't really compromise on anything, but you guys still got to have a wedding ceremony and all that. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how is just living? Because one of the things that when I got married that me and my wife did a lot, actually in like the first 2-3 months of our marriage, the house that the townhome that we're living in right now, it was not completed yet. So we lived with my parents for a little bit, but during that time, because of that, we took weekend trips like every weekend. Like we traveled a ton during that time period. But we went out on dates. Like we did a lot of different things, right? But that's not really an option for you guys right now, right?
Right. It is not. So yeah, it's been. I think there's pros and cons. I mean, I know that there will never be another time in our life where we will spend so much time together. And I also know that, like early in your marriage, people always tell us, I mean, married people who had been married for longer, they always told us like first year of marriage is so important. You want to make sure you're present, you're there, you're spending quality time, you're building the culture of the family. Right. And I really feel like we've had the opportunity to do that, like to the max, because we're together 24/7, really, like, cause I'm working from home. And when Deborah was working, she was working from home, so there's just, I think that's been really good, especially because, my love language is quality time. So that's been really great for me, actually. And the other thing is I guess on the flip side, there is, well, I guess this is a pro and a con, but it's you see your conflicts earlier. You know what I'm saying? Like you spend so much time around each other, stuff that would have taken longer to come out and for you to deal with would actually have a lot more opportunity to come up sooner. And so we've been dealing with a lot of our, I guess, crap sooner, right? And I think that's good, because that's important. We want to deal with all this stuff as early as possible so that we can know how to deal with it going forward. So that's been really good. So yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is that before we got married, we used to go out a lot. Like we used to go try these experiences. There's a lot going on in Atlanta all the time. We would try new restaurants. That's like our number one favorite thing to do, is to eat food, like new food and at nice places and all of that. And we just have not done that. You know what I'm saying? If we try food, we have to go get it and then bring it home. Maybe it's because I'm a little more uncomfortable than most people with COVID, but yeah, that's been, I guess, difficult. Like I think the safest thing that I planned for us was, there's this drive-through Festival of Lights in the city that we did.
Oh, cool.
Where you can stay in your car the whole time, but like beyond that, it's difficult. You know, we've been going to the park a lot. We've been taking a lot of walks, stuff like that. But yeah, but that's not something unique to marriage, I guess. That's something everyone in the world is experiencing at the moment.
Yeah. No, but I think the added twist of your situation is that you guys are trying to build, like you were saying, a marriage. And what it looks like right now, it's probably not going to look like this, you know, maybe a year from now, right? So you have limited options in the things that you can do. So I think, it's going to be interesting. I mean, for you, for me, because I was already married for like 2 years before everything happened. 3 years? Yeah, 3 years before everything like happened. Like the transition wasn't as bad, but you know, when you start off like this and then like having to have conversations about what it looks like, you know, like when you guys go out, even the conversation of when both of you will feel comfortable enough to go out and kind of resume everyday life, like that's going to be like pretty unique to a marriage born during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you one question though, because you mentioned that you were kind of on the more cautious side of the virus, and so are we. Like my wife and I were kind of on the more cautious side too. But one of the things that me in particular I've been struggling with is like a lot of our friends, a lot of people that we know are kind of loosening their the parameters in which they can like meet and things like that. But their parameters are much wider than the parameters that my wife and I have. So we missed out on a lot of stuff, right? Have you been dealing with kind of that, like struggling with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I feel that we're missing out. I do feel, I mean, yeah, I don't feel like we're missing out. I just think it's a matter of time, I guess, because I feel like we will be able to experience those things, you know, just not for a while. And I also feel, I guess, more, I know people who have passed away from COVID, and I don't want, I guess that's always really sobering whenever I feel like, oh, I wish I could be more lax with this whole situation. You know what I'm saying? I think, and in general, I don't know, I might have talked about this last time, but one of the recurring things that is like always present in my mind is death. Like I'm always thinking about death and how our lives are just fleeting, you know? Like literally, I think this virus is a huge reminder of that, because somebody, I mean, I heard a podcast about one guy who, you know, went to a dance thing before the lockdowns. And then in 10 days, he was dead. And those types of stories are the things that, on top of the pre-existing fear that I already had and caution, I guess make me feel less, I guess, caught up on FOMO and more caught up on, I'm just grateful that I'm alive and I'm healthy, you know? So yeah.
So, wow. So the whole death thing, right? Do you feel like, I mean, that must be exhausting thinking about death all the time?
Yeah, I think, you know, for a while it was debilitating.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it is, you know, everything that's not in moderation can be really detrimental to you.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think for a while it was like that, but over time it's been more, I think it's been more healthy, like
Mm.
recognizing repeatedly and regularly that I can't trust or hope in anything in this world,
Mm. Yeah.
because it's all going to end and it can be taken away tomorrow or like right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
because and that's not unheard of. It's happened to so many people.
Yeah.
So many people uh, love their family, and all of their emotional stability rests on their family, and then some accident happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or something like that, and I think it pushes me. It might sound weird if you're not a Christian,
Mhm.
but it pushes me to really look beyond this life and really think about, why am I here?
Mm.
If the purpose of God giving us life, uh, at least after the fall, and if the purpose of our lives was just to be comfortable and to live as long as possible, or to live just to live, then it's not, no one is fulfilling that purpose, because everyone dies,
Mm.
and remembering that our purpose is beyond that, you know,
Yeah.
um, there are things more important than living. I think, yeah, that's what makes it, instead of debilitating, depressive anxiety, it makes it, I guess, motivation for godliness, I guess,
Mm.
desperation, wanting God, and having a good perspective, thankfulness that also produces gratitude. And a lot of times, even with me and my wife, it makes me feel really, it makes me cherish the moments we have that are mundane, I guess.
Mm.
Even yesterday, we had an argument, and I felt in the moment like, I cherish this moment as well, because if I were to lose my wife, I would miss even fighting with her, you know?
Wow, that's awesome.
Um, so yeah, I think that's the angle. I guess it's really complex to explain. I think
Mm.
about death all the time, but it's good.
Okay.
It's like positive, but
Uh,
yeah.
no, yeah, and I'm sure that was a journey for you to kind of be
Yeah.
able to wield it in a positive way instead of allowing it to just continue to be debilitating. Because yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. On the surface, it sounds like super morbid. Really like
Right.
kind of like sad, maybe even alarming, right? For
Yeah.
some people to hear that. But yeah, that's awesome that you have that. You kind of put a positive twist to it, especially as
Mm.
a Christian, to be able to look beyond this life. And I think that's a really
Yeah.
really good message.
Mm.
And so are you looking forward to the end of this year? So actually, when will this? Well, today is December 30th. We're recording this on December 30th, but this
Yeah.
this will be recorded. I mean, this will be published in 2021. It'll be the first episode. But are
Mm.
you looking forward to the new year? Do you have any plans or any things that you want
Yeah,
to?
I mean, I am looking forward to, so I'm so grateful for my job, because my boss actually, so every year my boss takes us on a Christmas trip, right? And it's
Wow.
like all expense paid for. We are not allowed to spend our own money on this trip.
Wow.
And so this year we couldn't do that,
Mm.
obviously. So he gifted each family in the company a 2 plane tickets to a national park. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I think me and Deborah, I mean, we haven't felt comfortable going, I guess, anywhere that we would traditionally go. We always think about, um, yeah, we always think about like cities,
Mm.
but national park, we're more comfortable with that. But also, I am very optimistic that it will be safer to travel in
Mm.
2021,
Hmm. Yeah.
and that we will be able to go out to eat more, and we'll be able to see our friends and worship at church with other people. I think those are the most exciting things.
Yeah.
We were planning, before all this happened, we wanted to go to Asia this year, or 2020,
Hmm.
but because we want to meet each other's families. I mean, we were going to hit Korea and then hit Taiwan, but we couldn't do that. So, it would be awesome if we could
Mm.
in 2021. I mean, so many things. I'm also starting a YouTube channel for design
That's right.
uh, that will be started by the time this podcast comes out. I'm excited for that.
Hmm.
So yeah, just a lot of things, you know. Um,
So
and yeah.
Let me ask you about the YouTube channel. I've been meaning to ask you about that. So on your Instagram page, all your kind of design projects, you kind of show the final product. And then on the second one, in the video format, you kind of show the entire process of like what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
One thing I really appreciate about it is you don't just show the parts where you do it perfectly. Like you show like your first try. Oh, you don't like it, you scrap it, and you do you see the whole thing, right? So
Right.
is that kind of what the YouTube channel is going to be, or how is it going to be different from your Instagram?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go. I'm going to do a lot of explaining, like breaking it down. So the time lapses that I post on my Instagram, you can watch them and still not know how I did it, right? Even if you know the programs, I don't show like the palettes that I'm using or the tools and all of that. But I have been getting tons of messages over the last year about a lot of my graphics and saying like, can you do tutorial? Do you have any tutorials? Like, how do you use this? I'm totally new. How did you, all of that. So I want to explain that stuff. And I want to make tutorials for people. My first video is going to be a tutorial. But even more than that, I want it to be, a place where I can express myself more. I think there's I feel like my personality has like a humorous aspect that I don't communicate in my Instagram, because my Instagram, all the graphics are about scripture and they're, the time lapses. You don't hear my voice. You don't really see my personality.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can express that more. Even if I'm talking about design, I can you just hear me talk, and I can be myself. So I want to do that. I want to do like vlog style process videos for projects that I've done for friends. Like even for this branding project, I'm thinking about making a video about that whole process. And then I also want to do like product reviews, but not like tech or something that a normal person would know, but like design assets. So there's there's like these courses that I have taken to learn branding and to learn web design, reviewing that and making recommendations. There's some textures and some overlays that I use a lot in my graphics. And I want to make recommendations about like the best ones that I found, stuff like that. Ultimately, the goal is I want to provide more for my family. So having multiple streams of income would be great long term. But also I want to, I guess, be more prolific as a designer. I've always admired people who do that. And I've always been afraid to, I guess we have talked about this before where I care so much what people think of me that it paralyzes me sometimes. And I want to not do that anymore in 2021. So I'm trying to do that as well. So yeah. And I think it will help me grow creatively, constantly. I think the biggest thing that helped me grow this last year was I made something almost every day, and released it to the world. And I learned so much and grew so much. I think if I can do that with videos and teaching, and, designing that surrounds that, I think I'll grow even more creatively. So.
Yeah, it takes me back to the conversation, the podcast that we had like last year, where one of the things that you mentioned as advice for people who are trying to be a designer or to like get into that design space, you said something like, make sure you follow like designers that you like. And like there's a lot of free resources out there that you can tap into. And thinking about that, you've become one of those designers that people can follow to like draw inspiration from and to like learn from. That's kind of like crazy to think about, right?
Yeah, it is. It is crazy. I mean, it's crazy to me that people even think that what I do is worth a tutorial. You know what I'm saying? Because, a lot of the stuff that I do is me trying to like me seeing something and then I'm just going to make some posts to try what they have done, like what already exists. Right. But then people, I don't know, want to know how I did it. So I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I still don't think that I am where I want to be. I don't know if I guess I don't know if I will ever feel like that. But yeah, it is crazy. I mean, I think the progress is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and like we have like a year snapshot of it because I mean when you started the Edward Creates Instagram page, I remember you mentioning you started it with the goal of getting 1,000 followers, right?
Yeah, I
By
did.
the end of this year, right?
Yes.
But you're what? You're sitting on like 3,000 followers?
Yeah, I am like 30 away from 3,000 right now.
Yeah.
So I would really,
Go.
2021, January 1st, it would be great to get 30 more, but it is already way beyond what I expected. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a testament to kind of what you can do when you really hone in and like you're disciplined about your craft and
Mm.
yeah, you set a goal and you get after it. So wow, it's very inspired by your passion and your drive, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, because and again, it's that wasn't the only thing you were doing. And you did the rebrand for me. I know you
Mm.
made through your company you made the logo for Grace Church,
Yes.
Jim's church.
GKPC. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you had a lot of different design like streams, workflows that were happening, but
Mm.
I don't feel like you really like let up. I don't remember seeing a time period where I said, "Oh, Edward hasn't been really updating his Instagram." Like it's been pretty consistent. It's been like just yeah. So I really commend you for that. I think that's awesome and something that we can all be encouraged by, inspired by, and strive for.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. So what's the YouTube channel going to be called?
That's a great question.
Oh, you don't know yet.
I would say just look up Edward Creates,
Uh-huh.
Edward's son. Yeah, because YouTube does this thing where you have to have 1,000 subscribers before you can get a custom URL or 100 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have 100 because I haven't uploaded a video,
Mm-hmm.
so I cannot tell you yet.
Mm.
But I guarantee you it will be entertaining and educational. So
Yeah. Oh, so for now, just look up Edward's son, right? That's probably
yeah.
a decent way to get at it. Do you think the
Mhm.
word you'll have the word design in there somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, I will make my URL Edward Creates,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to just say design because I feel like I do more than just graphic design.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just want it to be creativity in general,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, guys, if you're listening, first go follow Edward Creates on Instagram. I mean, you say they're they don't really share your personality, but I think it's really entertaining watching the time lapses of
Mm.
like everything that you do. Um, and also by now the videos should be up. So go to YouTube and look up Edward's son, and you should be
Yes.
able to find. And last question I wanted to ask: that chair behind you, in the other
Oh,
desk.
this one.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, 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 the other one. Yeah. Is that so? I feel like I have the same chair. Is the leather like coming off of that at all?
Oh yeah, it is. The not on the back like
Uh-huh.
yours,
Uh-huh.
but on the place where you sit,
Yeah.
it is coming off.
Same thing happened to me. It was coming off. I actually ripped most of this off because I hated seeing like I hate inconsistent
My
surfaces.
headphones are like that. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh
My
yeah.
headphone things are coming off.
Yeah. So for anybody wondering watching the video, the reason why this chair is like this is because it started coming off on the seat, and I started just ripping it off because yeah, I need to get a
Just
new
go for
chair.
it. Yeah, just
But
own the look. I mean, it's like
yeah,
the worn, grungy, that's like the vibe of my whole Instagram. So
yeah.
I dig it.
Well, we're hitting the 1 hour mark, and I know you're super busy working on all your projects and things like that. So, well, but before we close out, though, I wanted to ask anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get into. Anything you want to mention?
I don't know. I think this has been good, and
Mm,
I think that yeah, I cannot reiterate enough that or emphasize enough that the branding process that we went through, I'm just very happy with how it turned out. And I think it's yeah, I really want to be like the guy that does brand identity,
Mm.
like not just brand design, but brand strategy, like
Mm-hmm.
we did. I really enjoyed that, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Mm.
And I'm grateful that you trusted me and allowed me to try this thing on you that, you know, you had no reason to believe that I knew what I was doing, but but it turned out well. So I think this is like going to be super valuable for the rest of my career
Mm.
because you allowed me to do that. So
Awesome.
just want to express my appreciation for
Yeah,
you.
of course. No, but now I get to wear the badge of honor to say, like, in the future, when we see brands that you create or that you help like design, I get to be like, hey, I was the first one he did it with.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully the future ones even live up to this because, you know, sometimes you feel like this is so solid. Like, can I even do this again?
No, no, no. I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure the future is very bright for you, Edward, and it's
Well,
going to
thank
be,
you.
yeah, much better. So yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us, guys. If you have any questions about design, anything, any inquiries towards Edward, please feel free to email me at ihthtpodcast@gmail.com. That's I hope they hear this abbreviated at gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram, and I hope to hear this. There will be a post with the new episode template that
Yo, let's go.
yeah that Edward created. And you can leave comments there. Anything, you can message me on Instagram or yeah, anything. You can find this video on YouTube at just search I hope to hear this, and you can see the chair that we were talking about both in my video and in Edward's. And yeah, again, follow Edward Creates, and look up Edward Sun on YouTube as well to follow him in his continuing design and creativity journey. So thank you guys so much for listening. A happy new year, and yeah, let's continue to get at it the way that Edward has been this past year. Bye, guys.